We could win this war.
We can win this war?
Okay, well, joining us from Orlando, Florida, is the man in that clip, Anthony Dream Johnson, who says he wants to abolish feminism and make women great again.
No, but it also says, with a trademark, make women great again for women. Always great.
Make women great again.
But they're going to do a 3-day seminar for women led by all men.
In mansplaining news, a 3-day conference for women led by men hopes to make women great again.
How the 22 convention will make you the greatest you ever. Raise your femininity by 500%.
First of all, how is a man supposed to tell a woman how to be the ultimate woman?
But women need to be taught how to be great again. Not my words.
We do.
Like how to land a husband, how to lose weight, how to pop out a bunch of kids.
Why do men think they need to fix the problems of women?
Well, it says the world's ultimate event for women.
In Orlando, Florida, that's going to be the scene of the crime. It's mansplaining palooza, and say no to the toxic bullying feminist dogma.
Taught by men to make women great again.
Taking the stage now is the founder of the 22 convention. You're in for a treat, Mr. Anthony Dream Johnson.
Anthony Dream Johnson.
Anthony Dream Johnson.
The first president of the manosphere.
It's run by all men, which promises to, quote, make women great again. This course is guaranteed to raise your femininity by 500%.
Together, we will make women great again. Excuse me, I'm mansplaining here. She said there's nothing radical.
Welcome back to the 22 Convention of Orlando, Florida 2020, being held at the first ever 21 Summit. Your next speaker is a personal friend of mine, one of my BFFs. I love him to death. Great dude. Got a great little baby girl. Got his fiance in the back. Great people. Awesome people. So your next speaker here is the author of several books, including The Map, a personal guide to the sexual marketplace, and an anti-bullying book called My Red Hat, both of which you can get on Amazon, and you should. We also have them up at the front. That's later, though, you can do that. This presentation is going to be titled, Why Make Women Great Again? And it is by the one and only Socrates. Please let me welcome him to the stage. Thanks, sir. Welcome back. First time.
Yeah. Thank you for coming here. In all sincerity, I did not think this would actually happen for a whole host of reasons. One in which I did not think we'd be permitted to do so. But a better man than myself dared, and that man is Anthony Dream Johnson. It's something we've talked about for years as we progress the 21 Convention, trying to help men improve the dating marketplace and the lives of men across a whole series of spectrums. And it was a natural extension to do this for women, particularly in today's social and gender-focused sexual marketplace and culture. So I think it's terribly presumptuous to make the statement, make women great again. It's terribly incendiary. We know it's catching, it's triggering. But I think baked into the question begs or another question. And that question is why? Why would I make women great again? And adds the question that there is a need to do so, that there is a value to do so, that we have an obligation to do so, or at least at a minimum, we should do so. We're not permitted to ask that question. It'll be interesting to see how this convention, these speeches will be fielded and handled publicly, and it will be very fascinating to see the retort on our political and sexual opposition. So why make women great again? Let's fundamentally ask that question. Why would you make women great again? When the risks for doing so are extreme, they are real, and they're insidious. I have personally been threatened. My home has been threatened. My family's been threatened. My 4-year-old daughter has been threatened. And I don't mean physical harm. I mean sexual harm. And the deviancy involved in the accusations and threats are amazing. and they're coming from women. So why would I do that? Why would I risk all that to include my job and career to speak up? Why would I? So why make women great again? When the sky is no longer the limits for women, when women can be anything, have anything, and smart and assertive women can achieve this and are doing so today. Why make women great again? Well, ladies, you should not be a refuge or a refugee from love, commitment, marriage, and family. You should not be the Cinderella of the one-night stand, and a condom should not be your glass slipper. Why make women great again? When harping on men, nagging, pestering, demeaning, mocking, ridiculing, tearing down, disparaging men has been so effective in society. Why? Because this is no way to get a man. You're going to chase all the good ones away. Men will turn their backs on women and feminism, and when you need them most, they won't look at you. Why make women great again? When this is the fruit of feminism? Why? These are our daughters. This is someone's child. Something's wrong. Why make women great again? When women are sexually commodifying sex, which, by the way, is in alignment with male hypogamous interests, my sexual imperatives. Why make women great again when women themselves are making them sexually disposable? This woman's marriage didn't last the length of a car rental. This doesn't end well. So why make women great again? Because we need you. We always have. We always will. I believe the sexes are meant for each other. I'm Socrates, and I help people navigate today's sexual marketplace. I believe that society, culture, sexual gender politics, and our sheer ignorance to our human nature has taken us seriously, seriously awry. We need to do something about that. It's why we dare speak up. It's why I dare risk what I do. By training and profession, I'm a licensed architect. It has shaped my world and how I view that world. And in particular, how I take my particular skill sets and apply them to the manosphere, particularly the dating and sexual marketplace, and assist men, and in today women. One of the most responsible things I do is I'm responsible for guiding an entire team to include the owner, the engineers, my architectural team, to create a vision and see that vision fulfilled. In the sexual manosphere, my job is very similar. My job is to paint a vision and to guide men towards that vision. And that vision is the sexes are meant for each other. And any design concept architecturally that we may come up with in creativity challenge and trying to adjust the demands of the profession, when they don't meet the vision, I'm obligated to turn it back to the team and say we need to redo, we need to reinvestigate. I do the same thing here. When the manosphere comes up with concepts and ideas and theories and philosophies, I try to keep everyone aligned to that principle that we're meant. issues of men turning away from the sexual marketplace because women have driven them away. Family told them so many things that they're inferior, they're not worth it, they can't have these things. And the threats against them are so extreme from women and relationships for life. That's deviant human behavior. Something's terribly wrong. Make sure that they bring these men back to alignment to their nature, that we're meant for each other. So let's talk about some of that. Let's use an analogy of art restoration. This is a historical picture. We're gonna critique it. But before we get into the nuances of the coloring, the tone, the saturation, and the brush strokes and the techniques involved, I think it's terribly important to look at the nature of the critics. And this is something that I've leaned heavily on from Douglas Murray's book, The Madness of Crowds. And one of the things as an architect, you are subject to a tremendous amount of feedback and criticism, but you have to be able to filter out what to take, what to use, and who to listen to. And it boils down to a really pretty basic understanding. It's really fairly simplistic. And that is this: of two critics, you listen to the one who means you well. You're obligated to listen to that. There will be another critic that means you ill, that will attack you, will demean you, will worm tongue poison into your mind so it seeps. They're there to destroy. They're there to wreck. Regardless of their character flaws or motivation for it, you can dismiss that critic. Right or wrong, you're best to dismiss everything they say. But on the contrary, the critic that means you well, you would be wise to slow down, not just hear them, but to listen to them, to take note, to empathize with their position, and try to see a different perspective of what you're doing and why, and how's that relevant. So let's take a look at this actual piece of restoration. This is the idealized sense. Here it is in reality. And here's the ramifications. At what point would it have been appropriate to tell the individual, please, for God's sakes, put down the brush? Stop. Do no harm first. I would say this is a kind of a nice analogy of feminism. It starts on the left, and through successive waves of feminism, it has completely deteriorated the female form, and it has literally stripped femininity from the female entity. It is making the female soulless. Let's look at that. At what point should we have stopped? At what point do we say you're doing harm? At what point do we say this isn't right? The problem is we're not talking art. We're talking a living, breathing, empathetic individual. I can't believe that we can look at this transformation and say we care about people and have this occur. And what does that say about feminism when they know this is the result? When we know that this is an archetype. And this is beyond aesthetics. This is beyond aesthetics. This isn't just a personal choice and allegiance to a sexual position or sexual political position. I think, in many ways, this is somebody who's affecting and transmitting the fact they've been damaged. This is a traumatized individual. And it's not unique. It's pervasive. I also think feminism suffers from what Douglas Murray also describes as St. George syndrome. And this is a case where St. George slays the dragon, justly so. But what happens? What happens next? Does the sword, does the lance, does the armor ever get put away? And the answer is no. What happens then? invariably, St. George keeps going about slaying smaller and ever smaller creatures to the point that they're doing nothing but attacking the air, tilting at windmills. That would be a sad narrative. That would be a sad existence, worth mockery, a Don Quixote, if it will. But the reality is that's not what's happening. No, the dragon gets slayed, and smaller and smaller creatures do get attacked. But the problem is at some point, they become a danger to others. Specifically, boys, men, fathers, families. And we're transcending even that. No, they keep going. Because it's going to be a neurotic issue. They're going to be neurotic behavior that will not stop until they're a danger to themselves. So what does that look like? This individual has fought so many dragons, she's a danger to herself. There was a concept developed in 1960. There's a book called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And he's a grandfather of visioning. And the concept for making people change and develop better patterns of behavior was to visualize that change. And the importance of that was that if you could visualize the change, you will be creating a reality. And the clearer and more defined, and the more times you revisit that, you make that real. You manifest that possibility. You create a reality that did not exist previously. And if you do it enough, your hindbrain, the brain, the voice behind your head that talks to you, will naturally gravitate to that. You actually convince your subconscious that this is a possibility, and it affects positive change. The problem is that phenomenon can be misused unintentionally. What happens when the premise is wrong, when the vision is wrong, when the facts and data is wrong and not revisited, when there's an error in judgment, and you keep repeating it, you keep repeating it, and you keep repeating it? What happens if you take the notions of the feminist attacks on men and keep manifesting them? It becomes self-traumatizing. Why is feminism not treated like cutting when little girls cut their legs and cut their arms out of duress? Why can we see somebody physically bleed and take pity and be alarmed, but when we see this, we acknowledge it and accept it? So let's talk a little bit about feminism. Let's go there. Let's dare to go there. What's the first rule of feminism? The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. It's a 1990s movie. That doesn't apply here. The first rule of feminism is you don't criticize feminism. You talk about it all day long, but you don't criticize it. Now, granted, it has been marketed about equality. It has been sold about equality. Every blowback we get is feminism is about equality. I think that marketing's half right. I actually do. I think it's about equality without criticism. I want, but do not measure. I want and expect, but do not criticize. First rule of feminism is you don't criticize it. The consequences are this. A petulant child will attack you. How dare you? And like I said, these aren't hollow threats. They come for your children. And they come for your children in a variety of forms. Feminism wants the rights afforded to men, the privileges gifted to women, and the protection provided by children without the responsibilities of all three. Tell me where I'm wrong. facta, non verba. We want facts, not verbs, not words. So if feminism is about equality, why all the revolutionary imagery? Why the power fist? Why the fist? Why the revolutionary language? If it's about equality, doesn't that mean about peace and balance and harmony? Wouldn't the language and the imagery associated with that movement be more reflective of those things rather than this? And shouldn't I judge a movement not by what they say, equality, but what they do? Why is it that so many feminist movement and organizations are so ardently striving for the destruction of a patriarchal system that has made way for feminism? How is that possible? I mean, the joke is feminism has a daddy issue, and that's probably not a joke. What do we do with this? What do we call this? When the language doesn't match the facts and it's beyond hypocrisy. They're selling you something. In many cases, it's a Trojan horse, selling you something that's a guise, but we're going to slip something in that you don't expect. And they're being very successful at it. It's very pervasive. This is an interesting quote by Camilla Pagula. I find it fascinating to kind of quote this. What feminism calls patriarchy is simply civilization, an abstract system designed by men, but augmented and now co-owned by women. Ladies, we've been in this together from the very beginning. We can't divorce ourselves from the involvement women have had throughout history in our relationships with men. You've gained a much greater voice and awareness, but with that, how has that been measured? What have been the determining results and effects? So let's go back to the criticism part, the two critics. Does feminism mean men well? How can you say feminism means men well when you attack, demean, want to destroy, disparage, when we're not even allowed to speak? How is it that the most empathetic sex has an inability to hear or to see from a man's perspective the issues we have? What's that telling us about these organizations, this philosophy and movement politically? How should I regard this? As a man, should I listen to feminism when they mean me ill? When they mean my sons ill? When they've turned on their fathers? Who listens to women like that? We all do. Women have a responsibility to police their own. Nobody wants to hear that, but you do. Because what happens when you don't? What are we talking about? It's simple. Bigotry. How does that sound? When you allow this sort of behavior to be condoned, to be unaddressed, you are permitting bigotry. It's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to stop a bigot. Nobody wants to be the person to say no, or what the hell are you talking about? That's not right. But because this hasn't already occurred, we're in the situation we are in now. How do we stop this? How do we put an end to this? How do we rectify the situation? How do we make better if we cannot speak and talk? How do we do that if women do not hear what men have to say? Ladies, you need to speak up. Sisters, your brothers are in jeopardy. Wives, your husbands are in peril. Oh, I'm sorry, mothers. That's what you do get when you don't read your notes. Mothers, your sons are in peril. Wives, your husbands are being slandered. You have an obligation to speak up and to speak out. And the interesting thing is that feminism's greatest threat have not been men. It's been strong-willed, independent women who are confident and secure and virtuous enough to speak up against this trash. To say, no, that's not right. How dare you? How dare you speak of my sons that way? How dare you speak of my man that way? Solus Deus factus venom. I'm not a Latin speaker, but it looks fancy. But the issue here is a basic tenet and principle of toxicology. The dose makes the poison. So let's conjure up a poison, shall we? How much feminism can you take before you become toxic? Before feminism poison you to the point of illness and of despair? How many of the rights of men can you take on and not expect accountability for? How many privileges and gifts of women will you take without reciprocation? How much protection will you garner without being accountable to any three of those? What happens when we add a great deal of entitlement? Got to add that to the witch's brew, right? Stir that in. Bubble, bubble, toil and trouble. And what do? It's not just what you put in, it's the things you pull out. What are we going to pull out? How about accountability? Pull accountability out. And here's the best one. How about any sense to your natural biological being? You being feminine, you having biological specialty, things that make women truly unique. We're going to scoop that up, and we're going to put it on the side. That's not part of our dish. That's not our poison. And you're going to swallow that. So what do we get when you have all these privileges and rights and everything else, and you have entitlement, and we remove accountability and awareness to our biological nature? Oh, we get Tomi Lahren. Right? And I'm using her as an example because she's troubled, she's hurting, and she lashed out. She did so publicly. Here is a bright, beautiful woman who's terribly successful, thriving by all accounts, and simply is not getting it right. And she doesn't understand why. Interestingly enough, she had a support group. She even brings it up in the video, her mother. And her mother gives her actually decent advice. Maybe it's really not them, but maybe you or something. And it was dismissed immediately out of hand, and to the point that she brings it up back in her case. The other part, what I find truly fascinating about this, is she doesn't understand her own biological sexual nature, okay, her needs and desires, and actually transfer it. She's so used to living and being in a man's world, she's taken on male attributes. And those are hypogamy, a male's interest, okay? Now, the funny thing is, she's trying to replicate what she finds valuable in men and thinks that if she exhibits those same traits, men will find her attractive. The problem is I don't want to sleep with another guy. I don't want to have sex with another man. You know, you sit down and say, and even it's not just a gender orientation preference, the problem is she's marketing the wrong things to the wrong crowd. What men are looking for are exact traits she's not exhibiting. Femininity. She doesn't embrace that nature. But she embraces all the elements of being ambitious, social climbing, successful, wealthy, influential, powerful, and famous. Those are all things women are looking for, not men. So she's getting that wrong. Now, the reality is we really don't care about Tomi Lahren. And you. How much feminism have you embraced? How much of this toxic stew that we just made have you supped on? How has that impacted your life, your world, your worldview? And the danger here is we don't know how much poison we've absorbed until it's too late. Now the problem is a lot of these things, they don't come with warning labels. You'll hear guys like Anthony giving warnings, and everything else, but we ignore that, right? Because they just mean us harm, because you've been taught to believe that. But we don't necessarily listen to the critics that mean us well, our mothers, when they do give good advice. And that's challenging. And if you're not taught to look out for that, what to be aware of and empathetic, way too many women are going to end up like this, or worse, like the women we showcased earlier. Now, I don't want to kind of conclude on a downer note. What I want to bring up is a little ditty. It was a really famous little song from 1985, 35 years ago. And I'm actually going to read it because I'm a horrible singer. Now, there was a time when they used to say that behind every great man, there had to be a great woman. But in these times of change, that is no longer true. So we're coming out of the kitchen because there's something we forgot to say to you. Here's the chorus. We say, sisters are doing it for themselves. They're standing on their own 2 feet and ringing their own bells. Sisters are doing it for themselves. Now, this is a song to celebrate the conscious liberation of the female state. Mothers, daughters, and their daughters too, woman to woman, we're singing with you. The inferior sex has a new exterior. We have doctors, lawyers, politicians too. Everybody, take a look around. Can you see? Can you see? Can you see? There's a woman right next to you. Now, this is where it gets strange. This is where it changes, the last chorus. I like to attribute this to Aretha Franklin, because she co-sung and co-wrote this with the Eurythmics. And it goes like this. Now, we ain't making stories, we ain't laying plans, because a man still loves a woman, and a woman still loves a man. Can you imagine those lyrics being written, let alone sung and received today? Ladies, in 35 years, you've come a long, long, long way. But something was missed. In those 35 intervening years, something terribly was missed. Something was bypassed and not looked at. And the problem is this. If women won't do this for themselves, if sisters will not do them for themselves, you are requiring and demanding that men do it for you. Do not let this misogynist quote that women promise and men deliver ring true when it comes to equality, particularly amongst the sexes. We started here. This is the guiding principle. We're meant for each other. So let's end here too. But I don't want to just end with the statement that the sexes are meant for each other. I want to show you our origin story. And this is a fascinating story. It's a tremendous story. It's not our creation. It's our origin story. It's when man became man. It's when we separated ourselves from the animals. When we became distinctly human, uniquely human. Do you know what's triggered all this? Eve, a strong, independent woman, went to the tree of knowledge, which was forbidden, and from it plucked the fruit of knowledge, of self-awareness, and free will. And she ate and consumed that. It was the knowledge of right and wrong, moral and immoral, good versus evil, and she consumed it. Eve was the original, strong, and independent woman. Remarkably, Adam chose her. Not just a woman, but that woman, Eve, the strong and independent one. And I find it farcical when feminists sit down and say men are naturally afraid of strong, independent women. That has never been our history. It is not who we are. It's not where men and women thrive. Now, I'll take this a little bit further. I will say that Adam went so far as to defy the will of God to choose her. I find that utterly remarkable. A man willing to defy God to be with a woman. And that's our origin story. Now, ladies, I think we need to reverse this story. I think the time is now that women need to go back to the tree of knowledge, to consume the fruit it bears of self-awareness, of free will, the difference between right and wrong, good and evil. And I think you need to consume that fruit again. But this time, you do not have to defy God to do it. But you will have to defy feminism and the harpies that screech its ideology. But to do so, you will return us back to the point where the sexes are meant for each other. Ladies, please, make women great again. Thank you. Okay, cool. Okay, if you have any questions, we have a little bit of time. I'd be willing to field them. It can be informal. It doesn't have to be really bright intellectual. If you start quoting feminist authors, you're probably going to take me into deep water. Any questions?
Do you think there's a tie between feminism and transgenderism?
Human deviancy. I think that when we talk, I think the human conditions, there's a great deal of anomaly. And what we find is that when we look only at the outliers, we miss the mass. And so even with feminism, I think in most cases, women don't truly identify with the political politics of what they see. They just take it because it's sloganism and they want to go along and get along. But the problem is that it's pervasive in that environment. But with transgenderism, I think there's a promotion for it now. It's coming more forward, and they're moving the Overton window forward on that. You'll see it. But historically, I think there's been a deviancy pattern within all the mammals. You'll see that, with sexual orientation between all mammals, that there will be either lesbian sexual relationships associated with all mammals. That's kind of, I hate to say it, biologically to be expected. But I think with the media and our awareness, we report and focus in on it, and we keep hitting the same things, very much like Maxwell Maltz, where it's visioning. And when you keep having that, out there, one, become desensitized to it, and two, there's a slow acceptance that it's no longer shocking. And therefore, if you don't respond to it early and fast, the roots grow. And I think that's where we're at today.
Well, I just see the fight to look at women's sports as being totally compromised, which was a feminist thing to have women accept.
Oh, I think it's been more than compromised. You no longer will have female sports in time because you physically can't compete. I think it was heinously criminal when you put a biological man who lived his entire life as male, had all the benefits of massive amounts of testosterone development, weight training, physicality, and then decides to self-identify as female, and then go into combative sports to literally hammer women to the ground. I find that utterly repulsive. And this is something that they knew and condoned and enabled.
But where are the feminists on that? It's weird how...
sex positivity, they're still accepting that. That they haven't thought that through, and it's a consequence that has yet to be resolved. But you will see that women's sports will probably it'll be either recorrected, or you'll lose female sports. You'll end up having the WNBA being nothing but transvestites because of the performance level. And if you want to win, and they do, you go with a higher performer. I think that actually opens up a great possibility if you're into like drag sports. I'd love to see a bunch of drag queens playing basketball. I may actually go to that, as long as they're not kneeling. I think it might be kind of interesting as a novelty. I know when I was in DC, they had the DC drag race, and it was amazing how fast grown men could run in heels and a dress. I was utterly amazed. So. Yep, hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we get up and bring the mic over? Or can one of the guys pull the mic?
I'm sorry. It's on? Is it on?
Tap it. Push the button.
My question was about Tomi Lahren, because I haven't been watching TV for 3 months. What's going on with her that prompted that section of your talk? I'd like to know the details.
Of which one?
Tomi Lahren?
Oh, Tomi Lahren. She posted a YouTube video in which she was belaboring the sexual marketplace, how men aren't just men, and how that she is young, pretty, successful. All her friends are young, pretty, successful, and every one of them are having problems with men. And she was completely bemoaning it. It goes on at length. It's really kind of cringeworthy until you stop and you stop hearing what she's saying and listen to the subtext. And when you start listening to the subtext, she goes, how can I be so successful, this young, have all the entitled privileges of being this beautiful and viral and fertile and everything else, and I can't find a man of similar value as mine that will take me in and to be a wife. Now, this is the same woman who actually, incidentally, returns a $50,000 engagement ring. This is the same one. It's not the value of the ring that I actually have a problem with. What I have a problem with is the man actually went into debt, consumer debt, literally put it on a MasterCard or I think it was American Express, okay, whatever the interest rates were, to give her the ring she kind of demanded and knew she expected. At no point did she say, what the hell are you doing? You can't afford this. We can't afford this. This isn't one of our values. Please take this back. Love me, but do not do this. That was never a consideration. She wore that ring. She accepted that ring and that debt load. And so then she's questioning why that relationship didn't match. And I have no idea why they separated or the stories behind it. Honestly, I really don't particularly care. But what the issue is that this is an individual in the sexual marketplace that isn't being successful, doesn't understand why. And clearly, and it's an interesting thing, she understands she's beautiful and young enough to be above the sex threshold. There's a no-brainer there. But she has not analyzed the system to realize that she's not compatible. She does not have the relationship skills. She does not have the relationship maintenance ability, or relationship management ability to be above the relationship threshold. And it's scary that so many people don't quite understand it. It'd be nice if somebody actually kind of wrote a book about it. And it's not really complex, but if you're below the relationship threshold, you can't expect it. Much like, guys who are particularly homely, out of weight, everything else, will not be above the sex threshold, won't be eligible for that. She doesn't realize that her social skills are such, good men don't want anything to do with her. They'll sex her up, but they won't have anything to do with her. And that's a plight we see over and over again. The worst case scenario is all this is technology. How do decent guys, and this is a conversation taking place next door, how do decent guys compete with not only social media, but how about social sexual media, like OnlyFans? I work at, as an architect, one of my projects is at a small university. And we're having a small conversation, and they have no idea that I do this. I keep this private. And he was complaining that he was talking to, and this is an administrator for the school, and he was saying he just came out of a meeting with guidance counselors for the school, talking about the opening on COVID and how's that's going with COVID protocols, and they were aghast. They go, we're having problems. And he goes, what is it? And I thought it was all health related. And they're going, no, the problem is that in the COVID environment, when everybody went remote, everyone's on social media, and most of the women that were going to this school realized that they have to pay bills, do everything else, and they have this integral time period in which they're bored, want validation, are not able to go on campus or go out to bars and get that sexual validation. And they turn to OnlyFans. And so it's a form of digital prostitution, you know, revealing yourself sexually, engaging. But the interesting thing is it also develops connection where you can type and, you know, engage in conversations, emails back and forth. And so all these girls had decided the amount of money they were making transcended the value of the degree they were going to pursue and get. And this wasn't a small number. In one particular case, every woman in the department had the account. Now, we can't make that public knowledge, right? I can't talk to that particular school, this is what's going on in that department, but I was made aware of it through personal contacts and conversations. So how do I tell young men today? Develop yourself appropriately. Become a virtuous man. In the face of that, when sex sells so readily, and that's a challenge. That is an incredible challenge. The problem is like very much like in architecture. As an architect, I am not responsible for a single component of construction. There's not a single element in this building that an architect was responsible for building. As an architect, I'm solely responsible for the design intent. I want things to look this way, I want to have this pattern, those sort of things. And this is what I do in the manosphere. I help men craft relationship structures and visions of those relationships, but it's up to them to build it. How do I have them do that when the quality of material and women that they will be engaged is so low, so sexual? Why would they? Why buy when you can rent? Okay, and in the Cardi B example, there's going to be millions exchanged. But was it worth it? Now, short term, she wins out. Her family will gain, her daughter will gain from that monetary exchange in that time period. But that's kind of whore culture. But what happens overall? It's not that the price of women dropped for low-tier women. Oh, no. The insidious component is that the sexual marketplace and value of women dropped overall. That higher quality woman, virtuous woman, the demands for them sexually, that sexual viability, that special bond that you have from a committed sexual relationship just diminished. And it's not the price point that I'm concerned about. It's the fact that more mediocre men that would not qualify for that just came into reach. The market was lowered enough that they are going to have to look at, like Tomi Lahren's now complaining about, that she will have to settle for lesser quality men. And that is a feedback loop that gets uglier and uglier with every evolution of a term, because the men know it. And hypergamy, a woman's biological imperative, okay, the things that drive women to, the things that they select for in men, are very similar to the male's hypogamous interest, where we're compatible and similar. Where they differ, and where we differ, they become acute. Now, I believe that the sexes are not only complementary, but compatible together. That we become great and thrive when she meets his sexual imperatives and needs, and he in turn meets hers. Not when one sex dominates the other. I think it's far more probable that men want to impress women than oppress women. New question? No, you're kind of in the background. I got bright lights, so.
Well, first of all, I want to say that the idea that men want to impress women more than oppress women is a really powerful thing to think about. And that kind of leads into my question of the red pill in the manosphere is very focused. A lot of sections of the red pill in the manosphere is very focused on trying to help women understand that we do need to police each other, which is legitimate. But the problem that I see is if women are going to change the laws, we would have to embrace feminism to do so. We would have to run for office. We would have to have those sort of careers in politics and business, to have those sorts of powers to make that change and be that influential. So it's kind of a snake eating its own tail. I don't know if you can see what I'm saying.
I do.
Okay. So we are kind of in, and you know I talk about this catch-22 situation a lot. It is a catch-22. We are either going to have to continue down the track of empowered career women in order to change the laws and police each other, or fall back into that femininity and let the rest of them just go off a cliff.
I think the order of things matter. And I think, so for example, it's going to sound stupid, but a pro-mason, somebody who lays brick, starts by working at the foundation, working their way up. I think the same way in politics, that politics very much follows culture and not the other way around. I don't think politics leads culture. And so in that regard, I would sit down and focus on each and every one of you individually to shape culture and to speak up, to literally, and I quite honestly mean this, to get together and talk to each other, form networks, and I believe, we call it a tribe or what do you want to call it, a sisterhood, that camaraderie of connection, of communication, banning ideas, and just an allegiance to know that you're not alone in this, okay? To voice up, to find that strength to speak up. I will say this, we've had 4 psychologists, registered licensed psychologists on the stage, and they've talked, and each and every one of them has put their license at risk to do so. A number of them have spoken very, very openly about the American Psychological Association publicly, at the risk of their own license. The 5th, a female, has actually chose to retire rather than to continue her license. Now she does not practice, but she still is engaged in helping people in alternative and legal means. But to sit down and say it's gotten to the point that an honorable, ethical, responsible, and moral individual has to sit down and turn in a professional license because of the toxicity of associated with men, boys, does more harm than good, and she was not willing to stand by and let that happen. I find that stunning. It scares the shit out of me because as an architect, I have a license at stake. And the idea of turning that in to support myself and family because of a social issue that I'm not permitted to speak up against, there is something seriously wrong. And because of that, I have no shame in saying that woman is a hero of mine. Not because of her sex, but because of her integrity, her ethics, and what she did. It wasn't just words. It wasn't just snarky criticism of the profession. She did something about it. And the reality is, I don't know if I would have the personal courage or integrity to do the same when my time comes. But I will say this, I am here today and I don't know the consequences. That will be determined. So I am very serious. I do want you to find your voices. I do want you to speak up. I do want you to band together. Social media, talk, personal exchanges. Call it out for what it is. And it's interesting that when feminism is brought up as bigotry, there's a shock. Nobody wants to be a bigot. And so ask the question, when has feminism supported boys? When has feminism championed husbands? When has it enabled men and fathers? If it's about equality. Okay? You don't have to become an activist, but a good woman will stop and say something. And so I hope to give you the courage to do so. If you need the permission, I give you permission, and there's something to that. In many cases, I give men permission to do things because they just fear taking that one little step further. And all they need is the acknowledgement of one other male as a mentor to do that. And so if standing here today, I can do that, please speak up on everyone's behalf.
I just have a comment. you brought up Adam and Eve and how do we get back to what Eve was supposed to be. And Proverbs 31 is said to be the woman's proverb. She is a businesswoman, she is a strong woman, and her husband is known in the gates, not for what he did, but because she talked about what a wonderful man he was. Ladies, you can do that right now, just by when your friends get together on a gab fest and you hear them running down their men, you say, oh, you need to hear about my husband. Guess what he did? I just celebrated my 49th wedding anniversary yesterday. And I am married to the most wonderful man who walked the face of this earth. He has loved me through bad and good, and we've had both. 49 years, you don't just breeze through it. Marriage is work. And if you're not willing to work and to feel good about each other, that don't mean we haven't fought. We've fought. We've had 3 children. One of them didn't turn out so good. Sometimes you have that. We have 9 grandchildren, one of which belonged to the one that didn't turn out so good, and we raised him. And he is turning into be a remarkable young man. He's just past his 22nd birthday, so that lets you know I'm an old girl. You can do it. It is not easy. We like to talk. Don't talk bad about your man to anybody. Not anybody.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have. Let's give it up one more time for Socrates.
Ladies, one last thing. I've always said that the value of coming to this convention is not found on the stage or the presentations you'll hear. It will be found in the hallways. It'll be found at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, when you talk amongst each other, when you talk amongst the speakers, and you spend days doing that. Please take advantage of that. That's where the real value is. You have an opportunity before you. Absolutely seize it. Thank you very much.
We could win this war.
We can win this war.
Okay, well, joining us from Orlando, Florida, is the man in that clip, Anthony Dream Johnson, who says he wants to abolish feminism and make women great again.
No, but it also says, with a trademark, make women great again. Fool, we're always great.
Make women great again.
But they're going to do a 3-day seminar for women led by all men.
In mansplaining news, a 3-day conference for women led by men hopes to make women great again.
How the 22 convention will make you the greatest you ever. Raise your femininity by 500%.
First of all, how is a man supposed to tell a woman how to be the ultimate woman?
But women need to be taught how to be great again. Not my words.
We do.
Like how to land a husband, how to lose weight, how to pop out a bunch of kids.
Why do men think they need to fix the problems of women?
Well, it says the world's ultimate event for women.
Yeah, Orlando, Florida, that's going to be the scene of the crime. It's mansplaining palooza, and say no to the toxic bullying feminist dogma.
Taught by men to make women great again.
Taking the stage now is the founder of the 22 convention. You're in for a treat, Mr. Anthony Dream Johnson.
Anthony Dream Johnson.
Anthony Dream Johnson.
The first president of the manosphere.
It's run by all men, which promises to, quote, make women great again. This course is guaranteed to raise your femininity by 500%.
Together, we will make women great again. Excuse me, I'm mansplaining here. She said there's nothing radical.